Raphael and Casey Jones's relationship embodies the phrase, "Don't fix it if it ain't broke." These two, across nearly every section across the Turtleverse, share a bond that's nearly as strong as time and space itself. And if you don't believe me, walk with me. Because you can go as far back as the original Mirage comics to see that the seeds that they planted in the 80s have grown and flourished into the relationship dynamics that we all love and understand 40 years later. If you've never read Raphael #1, I highly recommend it. Because remember how I said at the beginning of this video, don't fix it if it ain't broken? That's because there is a reason why every preferred version of Raphael and Casey Jones's relationship from the fans' perspective is a near one-to-one adaptation of the original Mirage comics origin story. What people need to understand about Ninja Turtles is, yes, they are parody characters that often satirize popular tropes that we see in most comic book media. However, the stories that they are in intrinsically write them as warriors first. And the story of two warriors' mutual respect for one another is the entirety of what Raph and Casey's relationship hinges upon. From the moment these two first meet each other, they do not stop fighting until the final page of the comic. It's literally just hands. The comedy comes into play naturally when you realize this is the story of two dude bros who embody toxic masculinity, who go on to develop one of the greatest bromances in all of pop culture. When their energies collide, it's a double negative. Kevin Eastman says he took inspiration for how he writes Casey Jones and Raphael's relationship from a film called The Quiet Man. It's a Western film from the 1950s. And in this film, it includes an 8-minute long fight scene that is pure chaos and comedy. And I think the spirit of that inspiration is perfectly embodied by 2003 Casey Jones and Raphael. In order for this to work, you have to make Casey Jones a believable fighter, and in 2003, he's no slouch, he's not a kid, and most importantly, he's not a cop. And when him and Raph go toe-to-toe, it's like watching a fighter mirror box. And this is why I'm such a stickler for the martial arts in Ninja Turtles needed to be taken seriously. Why? Because there's an art to this. The first standoff between Raphael and Casey Jones is like watching two dancers finally meet their partner, and the 1990 movie encapsulates this beautifully. Most people actually miss how smooth the fight choreography in this scene actually is because of how it's shot and how it's played up for laughs. But for an indie film made on a ham sandwich budget in the 90s, this is so fluid. And don't let these two meatheads fool you either, because the game that they're playing is as much psychological as it is physical. When it comes to the streets, Casey Jones and Raphael are as smart as they come. The 2012 universe did something a little bit different. They decided to write their friction as a long-term story device. I like the layer of nuance that it adds to Raphael's character, but I dislike how it ends up infantilizing Casey's. When it comes to Raph, he's given one more family member that he's responsible for protecting. But as for Casey, it ultimately just ends up making his usefulness be questioned every time he's on screen. I don't like that. Thankfully, it's not a question by the end of the series, because when these two take on Super Shredder together, their movements in dual text, once again, it's like watching dancing. It's not as fluid as in the 90s or the 2003 series, but it's still cinematic, very distinguished. I much prefer it when Raph and Casey are written as equals on a mission to protect each other at all costs. Thankfully, the IDW universe has this in spades, with great examples of both being in the City Fall arc and the Raphael Macro Series one-shot. In City Fall, Shredder is executing his plan to try and seduce Leonardo to his side. He goes about this by kidnapping Casey Jones, which sends Raphael into a ballistic frenzy. Raphael is running on pure instinct, trying to get his other brother back. And Raph nearly loses it completely when Shredder stabs Casey. But Casey Jones, literally in the ICU fighting for his life, is able to console Raph and let him know that this is not his fault. I cannot stress how well written their bond is at the beginning of this universe. And with Alopex's help in the Macro Series one-shot, she and Casey are able to free Raph from being captured by Agent Bishop. And this shot perfectly symbolizes what I'm talking about. Here we see Casey Jones on a rooftop watching over Raph as he walks through the streets of New York. It's an excellent subversion of expectations of what you would commonly expect to see in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. With the way that Raphael's written, he basically has a hockey that helps buff the power of will of everybody in his family. In Volume 2 of the Power Rangers crossover, Casey Jones is taken under control by Rita Repulsa, but instead of becoming the evil Green Ranger, he becomes Ranger X. And unlike the Power Rangers having to destroy the sword themselves to free Tommy, it is Raphael who is able to convince Casey Jones to free himself. Which Casey's willpower is strong enough canonically to do, because he was able to do this also in the Ghostbusters crossover with Raphael's help. Raphael and Casey Jones' relationship dynamic is so good, even in universes where it's underwhelming, there's still redeeming qualities. In Out of the Shadows, where Bay vs. Raph coerced Casey to attack Splinter, hilarious. It makes me wish fans of these films would demand more than one okay at best scene for all of the relationship dynamics. Rise of the TMNT is unfortunately the biggest cowabummer in my opinion. Season 1's Insane in the Mama Train has the only worthwhile scene between Raphael and Casey Jones. And you can only appreciate it fully after you've watched the whole series and realize that Foot Recruit has been Casey Jones the entire time. It's through the gift of hindsight. However, to be fair, with that added context, it's 10 times as funny. Then we get to the 2007 universe, where once again we get interesting subversions of expectations. When you look at this story through the lens of just it being Ninja Turtles anthology, it actually paints Casey Jones as way more mature. Because we learn through context clues that they're in different points in their lives when this story starts. And now it's Casey Jones' turn to help pull Raph out from the deep end. And despite this film's flaws, this was a really cool full circle moment for their relationship. At the end of the day, we don't need to reinvent the wheel with Casey Jones and Raphael's relationship. I know we're not supposed to talk like this anymore, but seriously, for the sake of their story, just let the boys be boys in the beginning and then write them into better men as you progress the story. Because I really hope we get back to basics with Casey Jones and Raphael's classic relationship in the Mutant Mayhem / Tales of the TMNT universe. Because Raphael deserves to have his dance partner back in full. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave this in the comments and stay lovely.